Hello everyone, this is Tina. It's time for our daily devotional. Today I picked a passage of God's words about His judgment. The judgment work is so important, and mankind has so many imaginations about the judgment, so we can get clarification about the judgment through God's words. Let's read God's words. God says, His work in the flesh is of the utmost significance, which is spoken with regard to the work. And the one who ultimately concludes the work is the incarnate God, and not the Spirit. Some believe that God may, at some unknown time, come to earth and appear to man, whereupon he shall personally judge the whole of mankind, testing them one by one, without anyone being left out. Those who think in this way do not know this stage of work of the incarnation. God does not judge man one by one, and He does not test man one by one. To do thus would not be the work of judgment. Is not the corruption of all mankind the same? Is not the essence of all mankind the same? What is judged is mankind's corrupt essence, man's essence corrupted by Satan, and all the sins of man. God does not judge the trifling and insignificant faults of man. The work of judgment is representative, and it is not carried out especially for a certain person. Rather, it is work in which a group of people are judged in order to represent the judgment of all of mankind. By personally carrying out His work on a group of people, God in the flesh uses His work to represent the work of the whole of mankind, after which it is gradually spread. This is also how the work of judgment is. God does not judge a certain kind of person or a certain group of people, but instead judges the unrighteousness of the whole of mankind, man's opposition to God, for example, or man's irreverence toward Him, or man's disturbance of the work of God, and so on. What is judged is mankind's essence of opposition to God, and this work is the work of conquest of the last days. The work and word of the incarnate God witnessed by man are the work of judgment before the great white throne during the last days, which was conceived by man during times past. The work that is currently being done by the incarnate God is exactly the judgment before the great white throne. The incarnate God of today is the God who judges the whole of mankind during the last days. This flesh and His work, His word, and His entire disposition are the entirety of Him. Although the scope of His work is limited and does not directly involve the entire universe, the essence of the work of judgment is the direct judgment of all mankind, not only for the sake of the chosen people of China, nor for the sake of a small number of people. During the work of God in the flesh, although the scope of this work does not involve the entire universe, it represents the work of the entire universe. And after He concludes the work within the work scope of His flesh, He will immediately expand this work to the entire universe, in the same way that the gospel of Jesus spread throughout the universe following His resurrection and ascension. Regardless of whether it is the work of the Spirit or the work of the flesh, it is work that is carried out within a limited scope, but which represents the work of the entire universe. During the last days, God performs His work by appearing in His incarnate identity, and God in the flesh is the God who judges man before the great white throne. Regardless of whether He is the Spirit or the flesh, He who does the work of judgment is the God who judges mankind during the last days. This is defined based on His work, and it is not defined according to His external appearance or several other factors. Although man harbors notions about these words, No one can deny the fact of the incarnate God's judgment and conquest of all mankind. Regardless of what man thinks of it, facts are, after all, facts. No one can say that the work is done by God, but the flesh is not God. This is nonsense, for this work can be done by no one except God in the flesh. Since this work has already been completed, following this work, the work of God's judgment of man shall not appear for a second time. God in his second incarnation has already concluded all of the work of the entire management, and there shall not be a fourth stage of God's work, because the one who is judged is man who is of the flesh and has been corrupted, and it is not the spirit of Satan that is judged directly. The work of judgment is therefore not carried out in the spiritual world, but among man. Amen. This passage of words is another deep passage of words, but it kind of helps us understand about the judgment. If we use our imagination, we might think that God will judge each individual one by one, but that is not God's work of judgment. God's work of judgment is to judge the unrighteousness of the whole of mankind, right? That God comes to use his truth as a judgment on the things inside of us that are not in accordance with what is righteous. Now, God reveals God does not judge man one by one, and he does not test man one by one. To do thus would not be the work of judgment. And God reveals, is not our corruption the same? It is. We're all arrogant. We're all self-righteous. We all lie. We all can have thoughts of hatred. We all can be resistant to God. So we all have the same corruption. So God reveals what is judged is mankind's corrupt essence. Man's essence corrupted by Satan and all the sins of man. God knows we fall short, and throughout history, God has been doing work on us to change us. And when Jesus came 2,000 years ago, he died so our sins could be forgiven. And when he died on the cross, he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know." Knowing that we're very ignorant and we don't understand, we don't have the truth, we really don't know anything. We use our imagination for many things. So God reveals the work that he's doing of judgment. It's representative, and it's not carried out for a certain person, a certain group of people, but it's a judgment in which he starts with a group of people that he judges in order to represent the judgment of all mankind. And it took me some time to understand this, that God judges a specific group of people first, and they're like test subjects of going through the work of judgment. They start to change, they start to transform, and then they will tell other people, and other people will enter into the work of judgment. We can share our experiences of going through the work of judgment with others, and they too can also fall in suit to learn how to experience the work of judgment. An example that I can share, maybe of this, my limited sharing, is 2,000 years ago when Jesus taught the way of forgiveness. Jesus ushered in the new age, teaching a select few people about the work he came to do, which was teaching man, you should forgive one another, bear your cross. And Peter was one that asked him, how often should I forgive my brother? 7 times? And Jesus told him, no, 70 times 7 times. So Peter was able to enter into learning how to forgive. And then he would tell other people that what Jesus came to do was to teach us how to bear the cross and to forgive one another. So it was passed down as God ushers in the new work. Mankind is actually able to pass it on to other people. So the judgment in the last days is work in which a group of people are judged in order to represent the judgment of all of mankind, seeing how God judges by using his words, and the result is to help us to look within ourselves so that we can learn how to change and see the things that are wrong inside of us to be perfected by God as the end result, because we're all corrupted the same. Our corruptions may be of arrogance or maybe self-righteousness. They vary in depth. An example is, I can share with you, I'm pretty self-righteous. My husband, he's pretty arrogant. So, but his arrogance is maybe more dominant in him, and my self-righteousness is pretty dominant in me compared to my arrogance. So our corruptions are the same, but they have different levels, but they're all the same. So the judgment is God using the same words to judge all these deficiencies inside of us to help us to become compatible with God. Like God reveals, he judges the unrighteousness of the whole of mankind, man's opposition to God, for example, or man's irreverence toward him, or man's disturbance of the work of God, and so on. Like 2,000 years ago, God's able to reveal why the Pharisees opposed Jesus. And today, people do the same thing. So it's a judgment on mankind's opposition or disturbance of the work of God, of showing us what happened 2,000 years ago so we don't make that same mistake, or that people that do, we can be able to discern that. So it's a judgment that we shouldn't repeat the tragedy of history, from what I understand of that. So God became flesh to do this work a second time, because only God in the flesh can judge mankind. If God were to judge us from the perspective of the Spirit, we would all be struck down. We wouldn't be able to survive. So God's flesh is a protection for us, and God's able to teach us. God's able to use his words to give us a way to change, to give us a way to see our true self. And so God becomes flesh to do this work, and God reveals the work that is currently being done by the incarnate God is exactly the judgment before the great white throne. The incarnate God of today is the God who judges the whole of mankind during the last days. So Christ is here to do the work of judgment. Just like Christ prophesied long ago, the Father judges no man, but has committed all judgment unto the Son. So Christ 2,000 years ago, he had the power on earth to forgive sins. And today he has the authority given by God himself to judge, which Christ is God himself in the flesh. And so God reveals no one can say that the work is done by God, but the flesh is not of God. And God reveals that's totally nonsense to be able to think something like that, that the work of judgment is done by God, but God in the flesh is not God. God has become a man to do this work of judgment. And because only God is the one qualified to judge us. And so God knows how to do his work so we can survive, and so it can be effective, and so as the end result, we can be perfected. So we should never stand in the position of judging what God does. We need to stand in the position of one that is incompatible with God and to accept his judgment, because his judgment is a love for us, so we can be perfected, so we can break free finally of Satan's control. Like it says in the Bible, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So judgment is a form of setting us free of Satan's control. But we have to have the truth to be able to do it. So judgment is a very, very deep topic. It can take us some time to learn about. It's going to take a lifetime to experience the judgment work to be perfected. So if you want to learn more about the Lord's second coming, about the judgment work, about how God does this work, let me know. I'll be glad to get you into one of our sermons, because it's so important to accept the end time judgment, because there's a judgment of purification, which God is doing right now, of judgment beginning with the house of God. But there's also a judgment of condemnation for those that refuse to accept the Lord's second coming, to go through the work of judgment to be perfected. So we want to go to the kingdom, and we want to have a good destination. It's in our best interest to accept the judgment that God is here to do now, rather than waiting for God's work to end and having the judgment of condemnation and God's wrath come down upon us. So if you want to learn more, please let me know. I'll be glad to get you into one of the sermons, or click the link in the description and type yes, and you can be added to one of our sermons. So that's my limited sharing on this passage of words. If you'd like to share anything, please feel free to do so, and we'll see you next time. God bless you and have a wonderful day. Bye.